Well, great. Thank you all. Thank you for allowing me to participate remotely. I'm just come from the Vermont Dairy Producers Conference that's held annually in South Burlington. So this is allowing me to do both things. So I appreciate the opportunity to be with you remotely. We do have Nicole Dubuque in the room, and Nicole is going to, in a few moments, go over some more details of our proposed budget, as well as Amy with our business office. Our financial director, Amy, is here as well. So, well, I'm going to get right into it. So this is our 2026 proposed budget. Again, looking at our mission, we are here to facilitate, support, and encourage the growth and the viability of agriculture while protecting the working landscape, human health, animal health, plant health, consumers, and the environment. So that sets the stage of our proposed budget. Just a couple of highlights for you at high level before Nicole gets into the details here. We have about a $610,000 general fund increase over the current spending plan that we are in now. And a lot of that has to do with the cost of doing business. There's not any significant increase in any of our programming related to that. As far as our employees, we have 6 exempt and 144 classified positions. And you can see the breakdown of the recommended budget. It's a $59.99 million proposed budget, and it breaks it down into the various categories of where the dollars come to fund the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nicole, and she's going to walk through our 6 appropriations, and she's going to give you just an outline of how the flow of funds go through the agency. And I think this would be helpful for you all, particularly some of our new members, of how the budget operates. So I'll turn it back to Nicole.
Great, thank you. And are you going to be staying on the call, Secretary Tebbetts?
Yes, I will be with you through the entire
Okay.
presentation.
All right. All right.
So for the record, Nicole Dubuque, I am the Chief Operating Officer for the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. So Secretary Tebbetts went into a bit of the overview of our different funding structure. I added a new slide this year, and I know some of you are new on the committee, so this might be helpful. But we've gotten questions about the flow of our funding, so I just wanted to run through that quickly. So for general fund, it's about 21% of our base budget. Obviously, that's appropriated every year through a governor's recommended budget, and then ultimately the legislature decides. The majority of general fund is we get a modest increase for internal services and benefits and other expenditures not eligible for federal funding. Federal funds, we have a pretty large chunk of federal funds as part of our base budget. It's 40%. The agency receives funds from multiple federal agencies to complete work locally that expands their bandwidth. So specifically, we get federal funds through USDA, FDA, and EPA. And those come directly to the State Department of Agriculture from the different federal sources. So an example of this is like meat inspection. So we take in money from the USDA in order to inspect USDA granted establishments locally. State employees do that, and then USDA reimburses us. Special funds, 35% of our base budget. So the agency is charged with collecting a variety of fees for licenses and registrations. The revenue received from the fees is used as part of our base budget and supports staff and operations. So an example would be pesticide registration fees are used to support pesticide enforcement and lab work related to that. And we have that as part of our base. Interdepartmental transfer funds, it's about 4% of our base budget, and that's funding that's transferred from another state agency or department to assist with their work. So the example I give on here is funding from the Department of Labor for farm worker housing inspections. And we do that through an MOU. Okay, so the agency is comprised of 6 appropriations. These are our divisions. So we have the administration division, which is where our business office is. We have food safety and consumer protection, which is a wide-ranging division that includes dairy, weights and measures, meat inspection, several different sections in there, animal health, public health and agricultural resource management, feed, seed, fertilizer, pesticides, Vermont Agriculture and Environmental Laboratory, that is our lab in Randolph that we are co-located with the Agency of Natural Resources there, as well as some tenants, and I'll talk about that later. And then Agricultural Water Quality Division. The agency budget maintains staffing operations to ensure main areas of focus. We talk about agricultural development, new businesses and markets, fair marketplace, water quality, regulation of feed, seed, fertilizer, and pesticides, and food safety and consumer protection, Food Safety Modernization Act, animal health, dairy, and I already said meat and weights and measures. All right. So this is just a different view of what Secretary Tebbetts went over with the pie chart that we showed you in the beginning. So our total budget is 59.9 million. 21% of that is general fund, 35% special fund, 40% federal fund, and 4% interdepartmental transfer funds. So area of change over fiscal year 25 is that there's a net increase of 8%, 609,000 of 5% in general fund, 563,000 in special funds, which is a 2.8% increase, 2.6 million in federal funds, so 12.2% increase, and we'll get into detail about that. And then 632,000 in interdepartmental transfer, which is 38.9% increase. All right. So I won't go line by line here because I'm sure you kind of heard about this elsewhere, but this is just all of our areas of increase, a lot of which are internal services and employee benefits. So we've got retirement, family medical leave, childcare contribution, agency of digital service, health insurance, salary increases. So that's the majority here. And then at the bottom, you'll see 1.7 million increase in USDA Dairy Business Innovation Center grant, and that's federal funds. And then 450,000 increase in Lake Champlain Basin Program grants, which is an interdepartmental transfer. So that explains these increases here.
Do you mind if we take questions? Just take.
Yeah.
Representative.
Okay, how much might change depending on what happens in Washington with federal funds? Are these like really locked in, or like the Farm Bill or USDA funding, would that come back, and bite AAFM at some point if there were cuts?
I mean, so I can't speak to the future in future years, but as far as I'm aware right now, through the continuing resolution, which extended many of the Farm Bill programs, a lot of this money is already kind of, I don't want to say guaranteed, but we have not been notified that anything is being pulled back at this point. I don't know if Secretary Tebbetts, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I would say, right now, the only program that we have heard of that's been put on pause and hold is the Northeast Dairy Business Innovation Center was granted special appropriation related to organic procurement of dairy products. And this was an earmark essentially of about $7 million for the United States, and the Northeast we get a portion of that. That's been on hold as they evaluate that program in Washington. And that program was going to look at purchasing organic dairy and getting it to institutional settings. Say, if UVM wanted to put more organic dairy products on the menu there, that was the program that was going to help that. So that's been put on pause. But the core program of the Innovation Center, we have not heard anything about that, as well as some other areas. You are going to hear from some of our federal partners, though, about employment. We are getting some information that some employees that are with USDA may have been laid off, and I think this is in the area of those that may have been newer hires and they may not pass their probation time. So we are hearing mainly on the federal employee level that there could be some layoffs in that area. But as far as our core program, we haven't heard of anything that's impacted us as of yet.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Areas of decrease. So it would be $110,000 state clean water fund grants that's decreased, and that's through the Clean Water Board budget. A reduction to the Natural Resource Conservation Council of 112,000. This is just kind of their base. This doesn't include the other grants that they receive, which is about 7 million. And then a decrease of 113,000 in fee for space, and that's internal services determined by BGS. So we'll get into this, but it's our lab in the Big E.
Is the NRCC grant reduction from the base amount? Is that a reduction in base, you said?
Yes.
I know that last year we had maybe rolled funding in the waterfall. I don't know if this is part of that, but in any case, if this is to the base, that answers my question. So
Yeah, so it was at 612,000. This would bring them down to 500,000. But like I said, the separate grants are about 7 million. They were about 5 million last year. But yes, I think you're correct, Chair.
Representative Lipsky.
On the reduction to Natural Resource Conservation Council, does that impact the Vermont Natural Resource Conservation District's funding directly?
So I'm gonna, Secretary Tibbetts, do you have details on that?
Yeah, that would increase. Just a little bit of history. We proposed last year about the same reduction, and the legislature got it back up to 612,000. I think, Amy, is that right? So we're bringing it back to the original base. So it would be a cut of $112,000 to that particular program. But as Amy mentioned, we believe in this program. It's an important program, but we fund about $7 million in grants to the districts as well. So this is some of their programming base money that would be at risk.
Like central administration costs. This is just a chart to show you our positions and how they've moved or changed since last year. So we've maintained net neutral. We were at 150 last year. We're at 150 this year. We have had some changeover. We had a staff attorney that was at the Attorney General's office. We were able to move that position internally through the position pool. And so the compliance policy and enforcement manager has taken over those duties. So it's kind of a 1-for-1. Then we have the AAFM communications specialist and the ag development specialist 1. Those positions were attached to specific funding. And so we gave those limited service positions back. And then we have the ag development specialist 2 and the contracts and grants specialist 1, which we received through JFO. And that's specifically for federal work for RFSI, which is Resilient Food System Infrastructure grants through the USDA.
Nicole, you might not have this level of detail at your fingertips, but I'm wondering how many of those positions are vacant at the moment and what the turnover rate has been.
So, out of the 150?
Out of the total 150.
So we have not had many vacancies at all. Actually, our first posting that just went up this week would be in water quality. We had one of our specialists move out of state, and that is a limited service position. So we don't have a lot of turnover. Okay, high pressure budget items. We have the farm stipend, 110,000, farm to plate, 235,000, natural resource conservation council. This is the one that we just talked about, is at 500,000, farm to school, 500,000, local food grants, 30,000, and working lands is 1 million. So this is level funded other than NRCC. All right. So this is the crosswalk overview, or kind of the ups and downs for the administration division. We've just seen standard increases to salary and benefits, but no other notable changes in that division. We haven't done any changes to programming.
Are those standard increases pegged to inflation rates or cost of living changes, or how much is it, I guess?
Yeah, so the cost of living increases, that's what I have back here, sorry, if I'm going too fast for.
Do we know it as a percentage?
You have it as a percentage for each division or just
For the
overall?
record, Amy Mercer, Financial Director. For the cost of living was 4.5% for this contract year, so that will be built into this budget.
So,
But that's just for the salaries.
so 4.5% this year just for salaries.
Correct.
And what was our increase in insurance?
I would have to calculate. I don't.
So I have it up here, so
It's 423,000, but how much it went up, but what's the?
Go ahead, John.
Nicole, is that across the administration?
across the agency.
It's just the agency, so agency to agency sometimes is different, the 4.5 goal.
Oh, I'm sorry, the 4.5% is across state government,
Okay.
but I thought you meant the 423,000.
No.
Yeah.
I'll have to calculate and get back to you on that percentage.
We can break it down by division, but I only have agency-wide.
Yeah, Representative Nelson was asking about, with the health insurance costs, is that what your question was?
Yeah, yes. Chairman, it's how much
We heard.
increase?
Yeah, big numbers.
Yeah. Yeah, we're non-school board, I'm well aware.
Okay, so this is for the specific division, right? We could probably pull out the insurance for here. And health insurance is, looks like 107,000 for just the administration division. And then we can move on to food safety and consumer protection. It looks like health insurance is 51,000 for that division. And then for this division two, standard increases, no other notable changes. We didn't make changes to programming. The agricultural development division, if I'm reading the line item correctly here, it looks like that's 86,000 for health insurance. I can send you guys an easier breakdown so you can look at it. So for agricultural development, contractual and third-party services, there was an increase in budget for the Dairy Business Innovation Center grants by 1.7 million. And I'll get into a little bit more about the Dairy Business Innovation Center as we go, but we do serve 11 states. It just happens to be housed in Vermont. Decrease in fee for space in the amount of 63,000 for the Vermont building at the Big E in Springfield, Massachusetts. That was calculated by Buildings and General Services. So we did see a decrease there. And I think that had to do with the maintenance of the building needed and the staff needed down there. USDA Organic Cost Share Program increased by $50,000. And we received $300,000 in a federal award for local food systems and schools grants.
Nicole, a few slides back, there was a $30,000 line item for local food grants. So what is that affixed to, that line item? Does it go to the local purchasing in schools, or is it?
So local food grants is through the Agricultural Development Division. And yeah, that's my understanding. I'm going to go to Secretary Tebbets again if you have more details to share. Otherwise, I can pull up the.
Yeah, that's correct. It's a program that's helped to get more local food in our out into the landscape.
In institutions or schools?
So there is separate farm to school program. So this is different, and I don't want to misspeak on the record, but I can pull up the like program specifications in the Agricultural Development Division in a bit and share that with you all.
Okay, yeah.
So then here are some highlights of the Work Regions Enterprise Initiative, which is in the Agricultural Development Division. Have you all heard testimony from them yet this year? Okay. Then I'll I'll go quick. So the cumulative program impact is from 2012 to 2024, invested 18.8 million in 555 farm, food, and forestry projects, leveraged an additional 30.9 million in matching funds. Investments made across all 14 counties, over 540 new jobs created, and more than 92 million generated in sales by grantee businesses, which would be over 24,985 acres kept working. There is a note down here too about in fiscal year 2025, and we get asked this question most years, that we received $5.3 million in requests for the 1 million in available funds that we've had. Okay. So DBIC, or the Dairy Business Innovation Center, which is literally the Northeastern Dairy Business Innovation Center, serves an 11-state region. So that's all of New England, as well as New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Delaware. And then, so it's one of four. It was established in 2018. The amount awarded to the Northeastern DBIC for projects extending through 2027 is 53 million. And here's the impacts to just Vermont, which is, I'm sure, what you all are interested in. So Vermont dairy farms and processors of all sizes have received funding across the grant programs, including on-farm milk storage and handling, food safety and certification, agritourism, marketing and branding services, farm innovation and modernization, processor research and development innovation, and processor expansion. So there's been 125 grants and contracts awarded. And the Northeastern DBIC has received 284 applications and awarded a total of 125. So this is 44% of Vermont applications have been awarded. Average funding award is 92,000, but the awards range from 10,000 to $1 million. Here's a nice visual that I like to share of just all the projects, and the color coding is kind of by year and what the project was. It's a kind of an interesting color code here. It's a good visual to share that there's been overall in all of the region, 1,016 applications received and 367. Public health and ag resource management. It looks like for health insurance here, I'll just keep highlighting that since we talked about it. It's about 68,670. And the crosswalk here is again standard increases, and then pesticide education safety program grant with UVM extension for $35,000, and that's to align with our updated safety and certification training plan approved by the EPA. Vail, Vermont Agriculture and Environmental Lab. Health insurance here is 41,000. And same thing, we have those standard increases. And then we also had a decrease in fee for space by 59,000 for our lab building in Randolph.
Is the lab owned by the state or by the university?
It's owned by the state.
So this is an agency would be paying for the space that it uses. That's what this represents.
Yes, so
Decrease in that amount.
yes, so it's a decrease in the amount that we pay BGS.
Okay.
Yes, we do, and if any of you follow the capital bill, you'll see that we do right now share a heat plant with the university, but we're working on that.
Is that Brian?
Just in the lab, because they're A&R scientists there too, how do you work out the budget then as far as who pays for what in the building, or is the staff separated out by budgets?
So it's an interesting structure. So the director of the lab is an Agency of Agriculture employee, but her salary is paid equally by both agencies. And then as far as the building space itself, what we use for square footage versus what they use for square footage is calculated by BGS, and it's usually like a price per square foot. And then there's also tenants in the lab. So there's Fish and Wildlife that has their own separate space aside from the Department of Environmental Conservation space. When we say A&R, it's primarily them. And then in our space, we have tenants as well that pay out of their budget for parts of the fee for space, which would be weights and measures. And our animal health folks have their own lab down there. And then our farm, our agriculture resource management folks also have space separately, so. All right, this is our water quality division, health insurance here is about 67,000. So water quality division budget has seen standard increases. We've talked about this, the decrease that to the NRCC grants by 112,000, decrease of 100,000 to the state clean water fund grants. Again, that's determined by the Clean Water Board and how they propose their budget. The Lake Champlain Basin Program grants increased by 450,000, which is an MOU with the Department of Environmental Conservation, and an increase of 90,000 in federal funding for ADX application support contracts. And this is the acronym that I'm sorry, I keep forgetting to look up, but it's NRCS. We know that one for USDA, CIG, and RCPP. I'll get you the full what that means after this. And then I can go into some of our programmatic performance measures if you're interested. There are some.
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, what's the difference between the NRCC and the NRCS? And why the decrease in one but an increase in the other when likely they're doing such similar on the previous slide?
So the Natural Resource Conservation Council, right, is local. We're talking about the conservation districts. NRCS is a branch of USDA.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so you decreased the local?
Yes.
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 Okay.
So the increase is funds coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we've reached the end of the budget slides.
Yes.
And before we go into the next part of the presentation, are there any questions? I know there's a lot, obviously, that you've just shared with us and can be a little bit perplexing, overwhelming. So any questions at all would be perfectly appropriate if anybody has them. And if not here, you can certainly, reach out later too.
I do have the health insurance figures, I just had to dig through all of the pages, but I have them by division, so if you need it as a total for the agency, then I can pull that after.
They should be fairly close. When these-
Well,
Depending on,
yeah, I mean, if more folks go to a different division, like in the slide that we showed before, where we had some transferring to different divisions, that's gonna inflate that division. Or when we have open enrollment and people choose different packages or a position turns over, and let's say they have a family, that package can be. But for example, the administration division, for classified, I think it was 20.3% up over this current year that we're in, and for exempt 22.4% increase. For food safety consumer protection division, overall, it was a 5.3% increase. For the agricultural development division, it was a 23.7% increase over the current year. For the farm division, 17.8% increase, water quality, 11.2% increase, and for the lab, a 14.2% increase. That's just health insurance.
So overall, sounds like double digit on average anyway. And that's, we've been hearing that in other conversations,
Right, total fringe benefits, I think some of them may have gone down, but overall health insurance definitely up.
Representative Burt.
But this is just a question to anybody, but I mean, is a double digit increase in health insurance common among everyone this year? Like a pretty.
I think sadly, yeah, I mean, yeah, it is common, and it's not just this year. It's become almost a norm over the past, go back a while, and we've been seeing increases like that, at least in many plans. So,
It's school boards, we're all facing the same thing, 14 to 20% increases every year. It's not sustainable, and that's part of it. What's broke with society. So I just was curious to know where it was affecting us here in ag as to how it's affecting us at our local school board and affecting us in our homes. So anyway, thank you. Thank you for just not being critical and wanted to know.
John,
Question for Secretary Tibbetts, maybe, Hanson, what happened to the Meet Maple Produce grants? I mean, were they sort of generational or a one-off? Or I know Abby said they were so oversubscribed because so many people, would love to get that sort of grant. So just if you could speak to, a conversation of how do we keep this going? Maybe either every year, every other year, or, at some sort of forecast.
Yeah.
So producers know when it might be available next.
Yeah, just appreciate the question. Just a little history. The governor and the agency, I think, proposed about a $10 million program a couple of years ago. And I think we received about 3.6 million. Amy, correct me if I'm wrong on that. We received about 3.6 million for just, outside of dairy. So they were earmarked for maple. And there was a special percentage of that amount that only could go to maple. And then we had meat, and then we had produce. And the response, of course, was overwhelming. And we were in a period at that time that there was some extra money, the robust economy, and we used one-time funds for that. Right now, the economy is a little bit different. Some of the needs across state government are a little bit different than they were, say, 2 years, 3 years ago. We have a situation where we've got education needs where the property tax increases. So some of those dollars, I believe, now are being earmarked to buy down some of the increases in our education system. Housing has become a priority, and also affordability. So that's where that stands. We just weren't in a position in a statewide perspective to offer one-time funds at this time to continue those programs. And that, I think we were pretty upfront about it, that this was a one-time deal, but we did gather tremendous information that still could be used down the road about the need and where it's needed, and what people are looking for to grow their business, maintain their businesses, or expand their businesses.
Thank you.
Through some of our programmatic performance measures. Act 250, we haven't seen huge changes in the on-site mitigation we've seen some increase starting with the number of projects reviewed. On-site mitigation up a little bit. Off-site mitigation, you'll see, it's had like a really large increase from 253 to 755. It was 278,000 million, and this is not something that we control. This is just reflection of the market and the projects that are going on right now as far as increasing construction and building. Vermont Produce Program. So we've seen a little bit of an increase in this with the number of farms with produce sales enrolled and verified. So we went from 663 to 704. The total number of support services provided, which are requested by folks, have gone down a little bit, but roughly status quo in this program. Working Lands Initiative, we just talked about that. We went over kind of the slide of where they're at. So number of jobs created, 545. The total increase in net income has stayed the same, and then average percentage increase in output has gone down a little bit, but roughly status quo here as well. DBIC, we just talked about this a little bit. Where you'll specifically see a large jump is the number of farmers who have learned new management strategies, and that's a new part of the program that's kind of been amped up. And then meat inspection, fairly the same here. We did have a couple of new meat inspectors come on board a couple years ago. And so we have been able to increase the number of inspections completed and the number of compliance activities addressed. Dairy inspection. We've got number of license and registration, number of inspections completed, number of compliance activities. As you'll see, these numbers fluctuate a little bit, but really they've maintained pretty stable. Animal health, same thing. We're looking at number of licenses and or registrations, number of inspections, and number of compliance activities. Relatively stable here.
Oh, I should have asked in the first slide, can you just define compliance activity?
Yeah, so when we're talking about compliance activity, depending on which program we're talking about, usually it's either that we did an inspection, somebody's out of compliance and they need to fix something, or it's because we received a complaint that somebody's doing something they shouldn't, and we have to go out and investigate that. Weights and measures, same thing here, number of license and registrations, number of inspections completed, number of compliance activities. Again, we were able to increase our number of positions here a couple of years ago, so we're able to do considerably more inspections, about 2,000 more a year, but the rest of the numbers have maintained stable. Maple, same thing here, pretty stable. The number of licenses has gone up by 2, which is great because we license our large packers. Country of origin labeling, best acronym. But this has been stable. We have the same number of licenses we did last year. Produce safety inspection program. We went up slightly in the number of produce farms verified in inventory, but otherwise things are staying status quo here as well. Eggs, the number of compliance activities, or the number of consumer complaints resolved. 2. Not a lot of complaints about eggs, except the price.
Well, what happens with something like avian flu where all of a sudden, there needs to be more capacity for testing, whether it's in dairy or eggs? Does the USDA then get in touch with the agency and say, do you need more inspectors, or do we reimburse you for, longer hours?
So we're not at a point yet where they've said, here's more inspectors. What we are doing in dairy with our HPAI testing program is we're going out and testing bulk tanks proactively to make sure that it's not detectable in our supply in Vermont. We don't believe it is. We haven't seen avian influenza in cattle in New England or New York at this point. So we are doing that, and we do have an agreement with USDA where they reimburse us for that testing, as well as they've helped us pay for temporary staff to do that testing. Secretary Tubbs, do you have anything more to add to the avian discussion?
No, that's accurate. We were fortunate to have an agreement in place back in December before the change in January. So we're in place where we have that agreement. They're helping us finance our inspectors going out and collecting those dairy samples and also the materials with it. So, and the testing goes off to Cornell. So they're helping with that as well. So it's not costing the agency or Vermonters in our budget. It's on the USDA budget, the federal budget, that all this testing is happening. So we're fortunate we got under the line there and got those agreements in place.
And to answer your question in regards to poultry, we have not had large outbreaks in Vermont at any commercial facilities. So we've had a couple of cases in the last year. And then I think previously we had one case last December and one case the December before that, ironically. And they've all been small backyard flocks. So we've been lucky there. Okay. Mosquito and tick control. So per Title VI, the mosquito control program exists to conduct statewide surveillance of, I'm not going to read all of this, but anyway, we're going to mosquito and tick control program, and we have obviously seen things in the news the last year on Triple E and West Nile virus. So you'll see here that the percent of mosquito pools with Triple E or West Nile virus have gone up slightly, but it's a fraction of a percent. And then the number of mosquito pools collected, roughly the same here, and the number of mosquitoes collected and identified, very similar to last year. And you'll see next year, when we do this presentation, the numbers will change a little bit. We go calendar year instead of state fiscal year on these. All right, back to the lab. So the number of completed analytical tests for clients provided by Vail is about 32,000. That's gone up pretty significantly over the last year. Percent of test results issued by Vail without recall or correction, 99%, love that. And the number of unique Vermont-based projects who rely on Vail's analytical services for essential environmental monitoring, consumer protection, animal health, and regulatory compliance. So that's ANR and all the tenants. There's 81. Into water quality now. This is essentially the number of regulatory versus non-regulatory visits that we do, acres of production area, percentage of compliant production areas, number of educational visits, and the value of on-farm implementation investments. So you'll see that these numbers have remained pretty similar. We have amped up our educational events from 2023 to 2024, and you'll see that the value of on-farm implementation investments has gone up with what we've been able to put out through different programs in that division. So then I can move on to carry forward. And also
Stop there for a second then. And I have some questions in general about some of these measures and how, I first maybe just acknowledge without going any further, but there's a lot of work that must go into collecting this data. And I'm not certain whether it's statutorily required and you're presenting it to us because you're also required to do that, or whether you would be doing it anyway. So it might be another conversation we can come back to just talk sort of globally about the measures. And we great that you're presenting them. Is there more use beyond that? And could there be different measures? But maybe that's another conversation.
Yeah, I won't go too far into the weeds, but I think it's good to acknowledge that we are looking at our performance measures and we're hoping to update them for next year so that they are more within our control. So some of these are just kind of like numbers of people that are registered, which yes, we would absolutely track that, right? But when we talk about the number of tests that are positive for something, or if we talk about like the number of projects that came in, if that's beyond the control of the Agency of Agriculture, we understand that, and we're trying to look at updating our measures to be more about impact. Okay, and yes, it is a requirement to create our budget presentation.
Budget part I do, yeah. Okay.
So carry forward funds, this is as of September 2024, for administration, $50,000 funds approved for the PAY Act. Agricultural development, we have a number of carry forward amounts for working lands, farm to school, farm to plate, local foods, and fairs. In all cases, these funds are obligated through existing grants or contracts, but we do a lot of multi-year projects. So the plan is to continue to expend these funds through the agreements that they're executed in. Mosquito control, so there's 400,000 here. And this provides for unexpended funds to be carried forward for the mosquito control activities to include addressing public health hazards. So if we got to a place with Triple E, for example, or where we had to spray aerially, then we could use this money to do that. In clean water, really the same story here is that we have $417,000. And then furthermore, in the Ag Water Quality Fund, there's 9.7 million. And all of these funds are obligated through existing grant and contract agreements. Again, we've got multi-year construction projects, pretty big ones too on farms. more carry forward. And these are specifically from one-time appropriations, and it's, I'm gonna sound like a broken record here, so I'm sorry, but it's roughly the same thing. So for working lands, the funds are already in multi-year agreements. The ecosystem services funds are obligated in multi-year agreements. We've got the organic milk and produce safety funds are obligated through existing agreements. Same with the conservation districts. The EV charger inspections is a bit different. That money, I think what we determined was that wasn't good enough for a,
Level 3.
yeah, for a level 3. So kind of in a holding pattern with that right now. The replacement of the existing food safety inspection database, we're continuing to work with the Agency of Digital Services on that. It's kind of a long-term project. Salvation Farms to expand access to locally grown food for all Vermonters. The funds are obligated through an existing grant agreement. Same with working lands, already obligated. Here's the Meat Maple Produce Fund. So the funds are obligated through existing agreements. Same with the Independent Retail Grocers Project and Beef on Dairy. And then we have the Dairy Risk Management Assistance Program. So there are a number of farms remaining eligible to apply for the funds under this program. So they're essentially just there. And it's still open for farms that are eligible to apply that haven't received funds yet. And then the Small Farmer Diversification and Transition Program, same thing, that $141,000 there is obligated through existing grant agreements. And that is our budget presentation.
So the last handful of slides there, the carry forward section, that's all funding that as of June. I know it says September, but is it carry forward as of the end of the fiscal year, or why is it September?
I think because that's when we turn in all of our numbers is September.
Okay.
But would it have, yeah,
That's when we request carry forward.
that's when we requested, yes. Okay.
So those were monies that were available July 1st. Unless it was a multi-year contract.
So it depends on the appropriation. So when we look back at the kind of base funds, oh, we don't have the numbers in here. But so there's some carry forward from different years. Some of these, go back to 2022. Some of them, most of them are from 2024 though.
Yeah, and so in the school budget, they would say encumbered.
Yes,
Mhm.
yeah,
Okay.
use obligated,
Use
but same,
obligated,
yes.
Encumbered.
Representative O'Brien?
What were the ecosystem?
Ag for ecosystem services. Do we have more on that program?
Not.
That essentially is a program that pays farmers, and it is a calculation based on per acre, but it's paying farmers to go above and beyond the regulations. So if they're performing on improving water quality, and there's a calculation, they get a payment for that. It's going above and beyond what's necessary to comply with the environmental regulations. And it's been very effective and very popular with our farm community. But there's a formula that goes for it. A lot of testing, a lot of data that goes along with it. But it was a one-time appropriation, and it came out of some rather difficult conversations a few years ago around Lake Carmi, where folks came down to the legislature and had a discussion about the role of agriculture and water quality. And from that, this program was created, and there was a one-time appropriation for it. And some of that money is working its way through the system, depending on those requirements that are needed to receive a payment.
Maybe the next slide will had the Dairy Risk Management Program. Yes. Okay, 2023. So that was the program that would essentially cover premiums if farmers wanted to participate in that program.
That's correct. Yeah, that's the one where there's an insurance program through the federal government.
Yeah.
And the state was going to pay for people to sign up for that program. Essentially, it would become free for the farmer if they enrolled in it. And some years, the farmer will get a payment from the federal government depending on the feed costs and depending on the price of milk. The price of milk has been relatively decent for farmers, so there has not been a lot of, I don't think a lot of payments have been made from USDA to dairy farmers to this program. But it's an annual enrollment, and I think we've started to enroll again for this program. And it must be we didn't get, I think at one point we may have had 85% compliance in Vermont to enroll in the program. So these are dollars that have been probably left over that folks that did not enroll based on our calculation of the need.
So we're looking at a list of carry forward funds that are officially in the budget as part of the budget proposal request that they be carried over and available. And so this is just, and that being one of them. So that's funding that could be used today as well. It was carried forward into this fiscal year, presumably, and it'll be, if it's not used, it'll be available next year. Representative Lipsky.
Secretary, going back a page, to the ecosystem services, and my question is, was there any calculation regarding carbon sequestration from either no-till or cover cropping that may go to offset some of the values in the 30 by 30, 50 by 50?
Yeah, I don't think, well, I think part of the equation with the ecosystems program, yes, I believe that part of the formula is, how much carbon are we, improving the landscape with that. As far as right now, I think there's a discussion about what's counted and not counted in the 30 by 30 discussion, but I don't think they've been, connected together yet. If that makes any sense.
Representative Nelson.
Yeah, thank you. And Secretary Cabot, the ecosystem services, would that be for projects like the establishing of buffer strips along waterways and whatnot to get them out of row crop to go above and beyond a greater buffer strip?
I'm not, it could be, I'm not sure completely on the details of that, but I know that there are other programs that are outside of ecosystems that farmers can qualify for some of those programs through some of our other water quality programs or through NRCS programs. If it's appropriate, it might be worthwhile to have maybe a deep dive on the ecosystems. It's really quite fascinating, some of the data that the team has put together, and some of the farm community, what they're doing to improve their practices, and then going above and beyond, and then being rewarded from that. Of course, I think sometimes a carrot is always great when you're having discussions about programs. So this is one of those. It's the carrot approach, but there's a lot of data. There's a lot of pasture work involved in this. A lot of grazing work that's been involved in this. It is capturing a lot of our smaller and mid-sized farms that are enrolled in this program. But we have people on team that might be, if it's appropriate, if you got a little bit extra time down the road, you might want to hear about it. But we're quite proud of the program, and we're appreciative of the funds that were given to it.
Do you recall, Secretary Tebbets, or maybe Nicole, or if we anticipated there still being some, only half of that, because I think it was $1 million originally, whether we expected it to be still only half of it?
And this may be, it was $1 million, but we may use this 585,000 that's up on the screen. There's agreements, and they may be going to receive a payment after some of the paperwork's entered. So I'm not sure if there'll be any money left over, or it just, some of those grant agreements, maybe a payment's coming down the road. So the 585 will get lower than it is right now. But we can figure that out we can get that information to like who's scheduled to get a payment and what we think when the money would run out.
All right, thank you. Well, maybe if we do a deeper dive, I think it might not be a bad idea. We could have you check some of those details.
Yeah, I can work on that. We do, and we're happy to get people in to talk about the program. It's kind of a neat program.
Are there any other questions or anything else that you wanted to say or share about the budget? Right, well, right on time, so thank you.
Gosh, on time? We never do that. That's great.
All right, good. Well, we will, so just talking about the budget for a minute. Next week, Wednesday, is the date by which we've been asked to communicate with the Appropriations Committee on any thoughts we might have on the budget. And one thing we'll do is say that we support what's in budget that we just looked at, or perhaps not. If the committee has different perspectives on anything, that will be the opportunity. And that's happening in every committee in the House this week and next week, looking at the budget in some detail. We've also had, as you will recall, a number of presentations from organizations that would like to either continue receiving funding or get some new funding. So that will also be up to us to weigh in on when we communicate with appropriations. And the Appropriations Committee works 5 days a week and long days on the floor. We don't see them all the time, but they still don't have enough time and resources to look at everything. So that's why they ask for our input on each of our committees' input on different areas.
Just one more question. One thing when is your sort of budgeting season? When's your deadline that you have to have, your agency has to have, like, here's our budget?
It's usually starting in the summer, and then we submit in September.
Starting a year ahead of time.
Yeah, there's a lengthy review process. So we, internally, we think about things that we want to do at the agency. So we've got sort of that area. And then we put something together, and we've given sort of some guidelines from finance. So the finance tells us, this is sort of where we're headed on a global scale. So they give us some targets. We developed a budget. Then we ship it off, both on the policy side and both on the financial side. And then the administration through finance, they work through, look at things, come back to us. We have several meetings back and forth between us thinking about things. And then, they put it all together. So, and then it becomes essentially public when the governor addresses you all, the legislature. So that's when, that's when the go sign goes for us. But we begin pretty early, late summer, early fall. We spend most of the fall developing it. And we monitor, like you all monitor, the economic trends of, the emergency board, how much one-time money is going to be available, how the economy is going. They're doing all those things that, as the agency, sometimes we don't have control over, which is, some of the cost of doing business increases that we don't have. So those are all factored in there. And then at the end, they say, this is where we're headed. So that's kind of how the process works for us. But we start very early. It's not a month out. It's 3 or 4 months ahead of time when we start our process.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you. Sorry we didn't get to see you in person today. But next time.
Well, thank you. We'll
thanks
be
for
in the
joining
building
us.
soon, and appreciate the time to do it remotely and able to attend the dairy conference as well. So thank you.